Hello, my loves. Did you miss me? I missed you, sort of. I had a rough weekend. I um I drove from Washington D.C. to Rhode Island on Saturday, which I believe was day 7 of the trip, and it was a seven and a half. It was only about 7 hours, but it ended up being about 7.5 hours because there was an accident in the last mile and a half of my trip. Um, But, with stops and everything, it probably took me 8.5 to 9 hours just kind of moseying from Washington, D.C. to Rhode Island. And, excuse me, I had a lot of time to think. It was the first time this week that I slowed down, and I struggled a lot thinking about my mom, which I'm not going to go into too much in this video, but it is relevant to not feeling super motivated on Sunday to do very much. I had to finish my note sheets, so I finished those up, and then I went to bed pretty early because I had been crying and had a headache. And on Sunday night, so day 8, I think so, I talked to my sister, and I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have the strength. I don't know if I can keep it together. I just want to go home. I've been away from my family for 2 weeks, and I'm not like, I get homesick, but not so much that I just can't function. But I think with everything going on, going through the grieving process, and then not having anybody, like, I can't hug anybody right now. I mean, I could be awkward, but so this morning, man, it took a lot of strength. And I was a big sissy because I was like, I just want to call in sick. I want to tell them that my dog ate my homework. I want to tell them I got hit by a car, but I'm okay, but I can't come in. I wanted a day off. But then I was like, if I want one day off, I want another day off and another day off. And I can't do that. So I mustered everything I had. And I got in that car. And actually, I had to run a couple errands this morning before I went to the museum. So I had to get my COVID test to make sure that I was negative, which I was. And I had to print out the note sheets because I finished them after most of the print and copy places closed in town. So I had to go there first thing. And if you guys know me, you know I'm not a very good morning person. So I was up at like 7:30, and I was at the print and copy shop by 8 o'clock. And then I had my nose swab at 8:50. And then I even had time to like stop and get breakfast. It was the weirdest thing ever. And I was like, all right, look at me. I'm adulting. I did it. I don't know where the strength came from, but I had it. So I got to the museum and I went to the wrong entrance. I thought she said museum entrance, but in the email it clearly said staff entrance. And then I looked and I was like, I don't know where the staff entrance is. Like there was nothing that was clearly marked. So oh, by the way, so I didn't realize that the museum wasn't open. So this guy was coming out of the museum entrance. And at first I thought he said, "Are you visiting?" And I said, "Yes." And so he let me in. And so I was like, man, there's like nobody at the front desk. What's going on? And then afterwards I was like, oh, I think he said not "Are you visiting?" but "Are you RISD, Rhode Island School of Design?" Of course I said yes. Like, oops, wasn't trying to lie. And so I'm sitting like in this empty museum and I'm messaging the gal I'm supposed to meet and I'm like, I don't know where the staff entrance is. I'm at the museum entrance. So eventually she found me and we were laughing. She's like, the museum's closed today. You would have been sitting here forever. And I was like, I'm glad I realized the error. So didn't lose too much time, maybe like 5-10 minutes, and we both had a good laugh about it. So I got to go in the exclusive staff entrance and I had a lanyard that said museum contractor. I'll take a picture of it tomorrow. You guys can geek out with me. It feels very exclusive and special. And I got to go. It was kind of cool, actually. It reminded me of when I worked at the Fort Wayne Civic Theater, which, has like all these like sort of catacombs of nooks and crannies and places to store things and places to learn. And the cool thing about the Rhode Island School of Design Museum of Art, or RISD Museum, is that it is attached to the Rhode Island School of Design, which is actually a university that is, or a college that is based in Providence. And so it is really a learning institution for a lot of the students. So, so they take me to this, she takes me to this study center, which is, so when I was in Los Angeles at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, I was going through and just seeing things. And at one point, I walked past a paleontologist who was working on or working with dinosaur bones. And it was like this open lab, and you could see all of his equipment. And he was like brushing away the dirt and like, finally like chiseling away things that weren't bone. And you could basically just stand there for as long as you wanted, and you could watch this guy work and like see him in action. And then it was kind of hard because there was like plexiglass and there wasn't like a good way to go in and out, which they didn't really want you to do. But you could like kind of shout questions to him through the glass. I didn't, but I saw other people doing it. So this is sort of similar, right? So the museum itself is open, and then there's like this corridor from like one section to another section. And in that corridor, there is an open, like, bunch of really cool, there are doors, right? So technically it's not open, but like it's open to see in. And then there's this table in the middle of the room that actually has a bunch of drawers with different textiles and stuff that you could just like pull out and take a look at. They're intended to be there for the students to be able to examine. And so they just kind of put a sheet over the big table, because also there is a textile in the middle of the room, and because the lights are on, and you always try to minimize the time that textiles are exposed to lights so that it doesn't fade the coloration of the fabric, or affect the light fastness. That's what the fading is called. So or color fastness. So I am set up in the middle of the room, and we talked about it. Tomorrow, the museum will be open. And so she suggested, and I said, yeah, absolutely, that I actually will sort of work for the most part with my back to the doors, so that my computer screen can be facing everybody walking by and they can see what I'm working on with my microscope. Or I might work at like a slight angle so that they can also see because I might be blocking too much, but we'll figure it out. But basically, I kind of joked, I was like, I'm going to be like a monkey in a cage. She said not exactly, but yes. So people will be able to come by and watch. And she said people will knock on the window and they'll ask questions. And she said, especially if they're students, we'll let them in if that's okay with you. I said, absolutely. So, so I was working today with the assistant curator of costumes and textiles, and the head curator is teaching a class tomorrow. I believe tomorrow is the last day, or tomorrow and Wednesday. By the way, so we're on day 9, but first day 1 of research at the RISD Museum. Just to keep things straight. And we are doing 10 days at the RISD Museum with 68 textiles or more. I'll tell you about that in a second. So basically averaging about 35 textiles a week, or about 7 textiles a day, or that's a little under an hour, about 45 minutes to an hour per textile if I'm like keeping up the right pace to be able to get through all of them. That is about on par with the pace that I was working at when I was at LACMA and the Natural History Museum. I have worked faster at other places because there was less time and more textiles. And you take what you can get, right? You do the best you can. And then it's nice to be able to spend a little bit more time, like the 45 minutes, because what I'll often do is I'll just get the textile and I won't even do anything. I'll just stare at it. I try to give myself like at least 3 minutes, usually 3 to 5 minutes, to just look at the textile and make any observations that come to me. Sometimes it's that the block jumps out and I'm like, oh, you can see like they made a slight mistake or the registration is not quite correct. And so you can see where the block is. And sometimes if you have a big enough piece, you can actually then figure out the exact size of the block, which is one of the things that I try to do. And sometimes you won't notice it at first, but you'll actually realize there's a seam in the piece that has actually crept up on me more times than you would think. Especially with um, textiles from the subcontinent of India and Peruvian textiles. Like they're really, really good at hiding seams that look flawless, right? Sometimes it's I can't think of other examples, but sometimes there are just other things that'll jump out at me. So I just try to take time to like sit, reflect, look at it for 2 to 3 minutes at least, sometimes upwards to 5 minutes, and then I get going on taking the measurements, making the observations, etc. And I know that I've talked about the note sheets and I've talked about the observations, and I know I've talked a little bit about like what it is I'm looking for, but today I decided that I was going to show you guys my note sheets, and this is one of my books. So this is an example of what I use to study the textiles, and this is one of the ones that I studied today. So what I will do, I'm going to show you up close. So of course I put the museum and the number, and then the title as it's listed in the online catalog. If they have a provenance that is listed, I list that. If they say where it was found or where they believe it was originally from, because sometimes those are two different places, I will put that in there. And then if it's got like an associated culture or peoples, I will put that in there as well. Hang on, I'm trying to see. Then, date of origin as they believe. And then if it is radiocarbon dated, which I have dealt with some, I will put that next to it. So all the information that you see that is filled out, that's already typed out, is information that was available on the in the online catalog, available to Joe Public, right? And then the apparent fiber content, most of the time that is listed, and most of the time the weave pattern and structure is listed, especially for block printed things. Most of the time it is plain or tabby woven. And then we get into the stuff that most of the time they don't have information on. So the warp, twist, and ply, the warp, twist, weft, twist, and ply, the density of the warp and weft, and sometimes this is hard to tell because there is not a selvage, so I just kind of guess. So in this instance, I didn't mark warp or weft, I just took them in the two opposite directions. And I try to find a space that looks like there are no holes, there's no like obvious pulling or stretching, that it isn't super threadbare, and then I kind of like probably what was representative of what it looked like when it was initially made. And then I do a range. Now my microscope takes down to the 1/100th of a millimeter. So I have here one of the threads range in one direction was 0.37 to 0.56 of a millimeter. So just over a half a millimeter. And then the other direction, the range on a sample, remember this isn't like the whole thing, but I try to take a representative sample, is 0.31 to 0.60. And then I put in parentheses, but most of the time they're around 0.4 to 0.5. So then I will put apparent techniques, and this is my classification system. So I have block printing, gilded or flocking, stenciling, painted, resist dyed, mordant dyed, or discharge dyed. And then, I don't know if I'm going to keep this one, but that's digital. I think I'm going to skip it because we're going to just do pre-industrial textiles. I will put apparent colors. So that is basically what I can see with my naked eye in the best light possible. And then I will put size of motifs. So for example, I measured a bunch of these like S-looking things, both the length and the width. And then I measured these flower-looking things. And then I measured these cross-looking things, right? And so I took kind of a representation, and then I have the size of the motifs. And then also here, I don't know if you can see, I noticed that there was an issue where the registration overlapped. So this shows me this is probably the top of the block. And similar, there's some overlap here. So that's the side of the block. Now, unfortunately, because of the way that it is printed, I don't know for sure the whole size, but what I can say is that section is at least 8 centimeters wide by at least 10 centimeters tall. So in this case, I can't give a definitive size of the block, but I can say it was at least 8 by 10. And then finally, down here, I have notes. So I put things like, no apparent salvage, not enough block space to determine the full size of the block, but we know it was at least 8 by 10. Um, I did weigh oh, I forgot this. I weigh it whenever possible, but most of the time I don't weigh the fabrics because almost always the fabrics are mounted in such a way that it just doesn't give any real valuable information. There were 3 textiles today. This was one of them that were mounted on just like very thin muslin fabric. And so I did put 11 grams with a mount. And then I described the mount was 2 layers, a thin cotton muslin plus a thicker broadcloth, black, and at the backside could not be viewed. Got the hiccups, excuse me. So this is what I do on every single one of my textiles. So I have 68 textiles. I saw that one today. It was pretty. Excuse me. 68 textiles that I have the notes on, and I'm pretty jazzed. I'm going to be seeing things, lots of Indian. That's always the case because that's probably the most prolific exemplars that we have, mostly of resist-dyed and mordant-dyed. Rarely are they actually block printed. Hold on, hold your horses. A lot of times a block is used to apply a resist or a mordant, but block printing indicates that a colorant was used and was applied to the surface of the block, and then the block applied that colorant to the fabric, and that's not what happens with most Indian. Most of the time it is resist-dyed or mordant-dyed. Most of the time it is, or oftentimes, I shouldn't say most of the time, oftentimes that mordant or resist is applied with a block. But just because you're using a block doesn't make it block printing. Does that make sense? So, ooh, this is a cool one I'm going to be seeing. So, lots of Indian. And in this case, actually, I'm going to be seeing a lot from the South Pacific. So, and the Polynesians, Samoa, Fiji, I think Micronesia, Hawaiian Islands. I'm going to be seeing a lot of tapa cloths. Now, most of those tapa cloths and sarongs and shawls are 18th or more so 19th century, which is much later than what I usually study. However, those areas were continuing to practice by hand the application of colorants, whether by hand or by block. I should say manually, not so much by hand. So manually, not machine produced. So it still is a reflection of the techniques that had been used for hundreds of years. And there are, I am not aware, if I'm wrong, please tell me. I am not aware of any textiles from earlier than like the 17th or 18th century from those various islands, nations in the middle of the sea. So it is the best we can do with just seeing what the technique looks like. Most of the times they're still using the natural colorants. They're not using synthetics. So there's probably close to a dozen of those textiles that I'll be seeing. I'll actually be seeing several from the Caucasus region, so northwest Iran. I will be seeing a couple from Egypt. I will be seeing a bunch of pre-Columbian. And I think that's it, like in terms of the major regions that are being represented. Oh, I will see this. This one's super, super modern. And is actually machine produced, but it was just so pretty. I was like, I gotta see it. I want to see what a machine produced thing looks like. So I'm just looking through ancient Egypt. Oh, and I'll also be seeing some pressed velvets. So these are basically pressed in with clamps or blocks usually. That one's from 16th to 17th century Italy. I think that's mostly... and Japan. I'm going to be seeing this Jinbei. That one is 17th century, 1603 to 1680. So it falls in my time frame. I like to do basically before 1700. Gorgeous. That one's resist dyed. So, yeah, I've got a lot of super cool, fun, and exciting things that I'm going to be seeing. And I know that I will be seeing something called the Reynolds coverlet, which is this big, huge wall hanging. It is an Indian piece. And then another Indian piece, Mughal, probably 17th century, that is a tent panel. It is a three panel, tent panel, all one piece. Let me see if I can find it. It is actually very similar to the one that I saw at LACMA. If you guys recall, I actually posted pictures to my Facebook. Of course, now I can't find it. There is a similar tent panel in I think the Cleveland Museum of Art. There's definitely one in the Cincinnati Museum of Art, which I just found out about, so I definitely need to go to Cincinnati, which is only an hour south of where I lived. Sort of like a past tense. And then there's one here. Oh, and there's one at the Textile Museum, which I got to see on display in that exhibit, the Indian Textiles exhibit. Oh, yeah, this one's from Bali and Java. So there's a bunch of indigo dyeing underneath, and then it's gilded on top. These things take 6 months to a year and a half to make. Per. Yeah. So that is... Oh, you guys will love this. Does that look familiar? I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll let you guys comment, and then I'll tell you later when I actually get to explore it. There's actually a maker which is attributed, which I find very, very interesting. Because if you know stylistically what that block looks like, it could solve a mystery. You're going to have to stay tuned to figure out what that mystery is. So, all right, I can't find the tent panel. I'll have to show you guys another day. So that's it. That is day 9 of the trip, day 1 of the RISD research. Tomorrow and for the next 9 days, minus next Monday, because they're closed on Mondays, I'm open to the general public. It sounds really bad. But, I get to see a Taraz band, which I'm pretty excited about. This one, unfortunately, is under glass. I took a peek at it today, so I won't be able to actually, really get in it. But it's really teeny. It's like that big. This is so smaller than this, but... So, yeah. I'm excited. Very excited. And I figured out a way to pull it together and get through, so... Oh, this is ancient Egyptian, which is very, very similar to a pharaonic textile that I saw that was dated to 500 BCE at LACMA. So, all right, I'm gonna stop babbling. I could show you pictures and talk about textiles forever. Oh, the assistant curator today said to me, "I love what a textile nerd you are." She's like, "You're talking about Z-twists and S-twists and weave structure and motifs." She's like, "You know what you're talking about. This is awesome. Rarely do we get people in here studying that have any sense of how these things are even constructed." So I took that as very much a compliment, which is what she intended it. So I don't know if I'll probably check in tomorrow. We'll see how I'm feeling. But tomorrow or Wednesday, I'll check in with you guys again, all right? All right. Okay, I love you. Bye!